Hello, my name's Cael Chappell, and I'm a basket maker. This story of my basket weaving begins, as many of my stories do, in Africa. In 1991, I started working at an African art gallery, and on my first trip to Africa, I saw a lot of people in villages working and living in very difficult conditions. And as a child, I also had lived in those conditions and knew how difficult it was. Living without running water or electricity, in an improvised shelter, or other things like, trying to find or catch food for the day. Um, a lot of things that most people here would consider being homeless. I lived that as a child at times, and very quickly understood how difficult that is living in Africa in those villages. By 2001, an idea had fully formed to start a project called Baskets of Africa. Baskets of Africa was designed from the ground up to provide as much money to the people in Africa who make the baskets, the items. I chose baskets at the time because I had fallen in love with baskets when I was working for the African Art Gallery, working with basket weavers from Botswana and Swaziland, which is now called Eswatini. Baskets also are woven all over Africa. At one point in history, I believe basket weaving is universal to humankind. Every culture wove baskets. So I thought this will give me a good opportunity to spend the rest of my life exploring the whole continent of Africa and looking for all different types of baskets. Now, if we fast forward from there to 2017, I was selling at a fiber arts fiesta here in Albuquerque for Baskets of Africa. And a customer I was speaking with, I mentioned to her that I had always wanted to learn how to weave baskets because when I'm in Africa, the ladies in the villages, and it is primarily women, always ask me to sit and stay and weave baskets with them. And I would always tell them I don't know how and I can't do that, but thank you for the offer and move on to the next village or the next weaving group. In 2017, this customer here in Albuquerque offered to teach me how to weave. She said, I know how to weave baskets and I'll come and teach you. So she taught me some of the basics, and I spent about a year trying to do coiling and twining, and I really fell in love with twining, which is what you'll see in the Craft Boston Fiber Stories show as some of my twining work. So here I wanted to give you an idea of a few of my pieces and the progressions that I made. This was made before my class with Lois Russell when I was just trying to figure things out on my own. This is one of my New Mexico baskets where I was working on different types of bases and patterns, how to make diagonal lines smoothly, and different ways to finish the rim as well. Likewise, another New Mexico basket, just because these are our state colors here. We're, I believe, the only state that doesn't have red, white, or blue in their state flag. This was one of the very last pieces, the second to last piece I made before I took the class at Haystack from Lois Russell, and I had all of the spokes just sort of flowing into the inside, so I call it waterfall. And again, this is during that phase of my first year when I was trying to figure things out. And you'll see this in the Craft Boston show. At the end of that year, I was sort of up against the limits of everything I could figure out how to do on my own, and found that Lois Russell was teaching at Haystack back in Maine, Haystack Mountain School of Craft. So I booked a flight and reserved a seat in her class, and at the end of 2018 went to Haystack and took I believe it was a 5-day class with Lois, and just learned a lot. Learned things like on day one that I was weaving backwards and I wasn't actually twining, I was reverse twining. And but Lois taught me a lot more basic techniques and proper ways to do things. Immediately after the class with Lois, I did this basket mostly because I was trying to come up with an interesting base. And actually, I made this base at Haystack. And then I finished the basket when I got home and learned how to do this interior lining with a different pattern from Lois, and was experimenting with that. This one I wasn't intentionally trying to, but I ended up making a basket shaped like a UFO. So it's called Roswell Study A. Um, and you'll see that one also in the Craft Boston Fiber Stories show. Uh, this one also, similarly, after the class with Lois, when I learned how to do the interior, it's really hard to see here, but the interior wraps all the way down to the inside. And I was using a heavier gauge wax linen thread on that one as well, to give you an idea of scale, because my hands are extra large, but these are quite miniature, quite small baskets. But I'm not a normal size human, so my hands are very large, and that makes the baskets look even smaller. So after I attended Haystack, and I got a lot of encouragement from Lois Russell, and a lot of inspiration from her basketry, a lot of support from her and my fellow students and other people in the community there at Haystack. I really spent a year focused on trying to do some serious baskets, trying to do some perfect circles, some perfect triangle, shaped baskets, trying to expand the number of patterns that I could make using some of the new techniques that Lois had taught me. And my work really took a huge leap forward during that year following Haystack. Now, during that year after I took the class at Haystack with Lois, I actually spent a lot of time experimenting with how small I could make a basket. And another basket weaving friend, Ralph Simpson, recommended that I try weaving over a form, which I had never done before. So I was weaving over a thimble. Actually, he suggested a thimble. I was weaving over a thimble, and started doing like sets of 3 different sizes of thimbles once I figured out that there are different sizes of thimbles. And this set I actually made on an airplane when I was traveling to Europe. And as I was experimenting with these small baskets, I couldn't figure out how I could display them. So this piece you'll see in the Fiber Stories exhibit. I'm not sure if you can hear it or not, but it makes a little noise, and it's kind of an interactive piece. The baskets will get mixed up and they'll move around in there. They're all different shapes and sizes in this piece, and then sealed into a wax tube with letter sealing wax. These are called, this series where the baskets are captured in a glass tube is called Basketry Alchemy. This one inspired by Acoma, which is in the Fiber Stories exhibit. The logical progression for me during that time was to see how small could I go with a basket. And I was making these for a bit. And then eventually I got down to this size, seemed to be about the smallest that I could make. And each one of these is detailed with more than 150 stitches. The pattern is so small you almost can't see it with the naked eye. And in order to weave these, I actually weave it without any aid except my normal glasses, but then I look at it under a jeweler's loupe to see if I have any mistakes in there. And I often get the question, you know, my hands are so big, how do I weave a basket so small? And the only answer I can give is I don't know. So, but I enjoy it. It's a fun challenge. Then in 2019, the summer of 2019, I went to Kentucky to the National Basketry Organization conference, and they had several exhibitions in conjunction with the conference. I was honored to have two of my pieces featured in the museum exhibition there, and I got to see and meet a lot of other basket makers and weavers whose work I had never seen before in person. And one person in particular, when I saw his work, just a light bulb went off in my head and it changed the course of what I was doing. I saw the work of Norman Sherfield, and you'll see his work here in the Craft Boston Fiber Stories show as well. And it's just very whimsical and very creative and very, not taking itself too seriously. So when I saw his work, I realized I don't have to take myself so seriously either. I don't have to take my work so seriously. I can just have fun and just weave whatever I see, whatever I want. And that really was another point where my work took a turn and I started to explore different themes and ideas that were just pure fun and whatever I think of. And then I spent a year really doing that. And this is some of my more recent work. This is in the Fiber Stories show. This one is called, has the same seal. This is Basketry Alchemy. So the black and white Basketry Alchemy was the last piece I made right before I went to the National Basketry Organization conference in 2019. This one I made in 2020, and it's called Vote 2020, Basketry Alchemy Vote 2020. Just, designed to get people thinking about voting. It was in a show called Right to Vote back in Rhode Island. This one was one of the first pieces I did after seeing Norman Sherfield's work in Kentucky at the National Basketry Organization conference in 2019 called Susesque. And this is another in the Susesque series here. This is called Susesque Truffula, like the truffula trees from the Lorax book. And this one traveled with Small Expressions, the HGA show. A lot of these pieces have traveled or been to exhibitions. This is my latest Susesque, which is called Cat's Hat. And I'm exploring this exposed spoke technique, which I hadn't seen before. And this actually sits upside down. This is the bottom of the basket, or this is the top of the basket, I'm sorry. This is the bottom of the basket, which is the top of the cat's hat. So this one is also in the Fiber Stories exhibition. This was the first piece I did at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's called Balance Interrupted, because it looks like it's about to fall over. Like the balance of life itself had been interrupted by the pandemic, and it looks like it's going to fall over. And I experimented with this open weave rim treatment here. which I think turned out quite interesting. And pretty much, I think every basket I make has an interesting pattern on the bottom as well. This was done right after the election. This one's called Purge. And had fun with that, but you can see the shape is reminiscent of some of these other shapes that I've been doing. And this is one of my latest pieces called Joy's Rose. Joy's Rose. And this one I actually made for my Aunt Joy, and she wanted me to weave a rose, hence the name Joy's Rose, which can have multiple meanings. And then at the beginning of 2020, I took a trip to Uganda and Kenya and spent time back in Africa weaving baskets in the villages and dyeing with natural dyes, and really kind of bringing it full circle where I could actually sit with the weavers and weave baskets with them. And they were amazed. They were laughing, and we had a great time. They couldn't believe that I was all the way out there in their village and I could make baskets. And I knew when I get an idea in my head, basically I can't weave anything else until I get that idea woven. And when I start a basket, I don't know how I'm going to make it. I don't know how, there's always some aspects of it that I don't know how it's going to turn out or how I'm going to do it. But I figure it out as I weave. You know, as I go along, I try different things and I figure out how to bring that sort of vision that I have or idea that I have in my head into a basket. So some of my work maybe would be considered small sculptural work and maybe a little bit less basketry, but 100% basketry techniques. That's all I use. And primarily, like I say, twining. I do some coiling, but I'm just not as enamored with it as I am with twining. And the material I use is a waxed linen. So it's a natural fiber, but then waxed to give it a bit of it has a really nice hand feel, I would call it, when you're weaving. And I've heard other people say that they hate the feel of the waxed linen on their hands. But I really love it. It has almost like a beeswax feel. And in fact, if I use a fiber that isn't waxed, I will wax it myself with beeswax. And it gives a little bit of tackiness to it. Hi, I'm here in my warehouse full of African baskets and just wanted to take a moment to thank Craft Boston Fiber Stories and the Society of Arts and Crafts for selecting my work. Balance Interrupted you'll see in the show as well. And because of this show, the Albuquerque Journal, our largest newspaper in New Mexico, did this amazing article about my work and about my Baskets of Africa project. And it couldn't have happened without Craft Boston Fiber Stories. So thank you for selecting me and for supporting artists of all types.